Hi everyone, Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. Today I'm at Innovista Law, the home of the TCPA Defense Force. And I'm sitting here with attorney Ernesto Mendieta, and we're talking about international messaging. And not people text messaging internationally, but actually people outside of the United States texting US consumers. Because we have a thing here in the United States called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And it essentially protects consumers from receiving text message spam. Now, I get a lot of questions on companies or from companies saying, well, if I have a company outside the United States and I'm texting in to the United States, do I have to follow the TCPA?
You do have to follow the TCPA. Even the TCPA text expressly says that the prohibitions that it contains are applicable to calls within the United States, but also for persons outside the United States calling into the United States. So the TCPA recognizes in its own text that there's a possibility of people calling or sending messages from outside its borders, and the TCPA must be complied with.
And there's no, I've heard people, maybe spammers try to get around the TCPA. They will have a brand, but then they'll hire, they'll have a brand in the United States, they'll hire a call center outside the United States to try to maybe skirt the rules. Is there any way that a brand can really skirt the rules when it comes to TCPA compliance if you're texting people in the United States?
No, if the recipient is within the United States, meaning a U.S. telephone number, the TCPA will apply and the liability is there. So whenever any company needs or is contacting a U.S. customer, the TCPA will apply. This plays in both ways. For international companies that are marketing their products or services all around the world, if they're targeting the U.S. market and U.S. consumers, they will have to comply with the TCPA. And the other side of this story is U.S. companies who, for cost purposes or for whatever reason in their strategy, they say complying with the TCPA is too complicated. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to hire an agent, or I'm going to hire a call center down in Asia or down in Latin America. It will save me this much amount of money, and I won't have to worry about regulations because who's calling? Latin America.
It's not us.
It's not us. But here we have to remember the vicarious liability under the TCPA. If you have an agent doing calls or sending messages on your behalf, the company is the one who's going to be liable. So it doesn't matter where it is located. If you have equipment, if you have your server, if you have your software outside the U.S., if you're contacting U.S. consumers, you have to comply with the TCPA.
Because the FCC essentially put the TCPA in place to protect U.S. consumers. So at the end of the day, it's to protect U.S. consumers. And it seems like they've done a pretty good job of making sure there's no loopholes.
Yes, and you could say it's a little unfair that they're going to international companies, but not really, because they're targeting, international companies, but they are trying to do business in the U.S., so they should comply with the U.S. laws.
And I know you know a lot about foreign laws and foreign calling. Is there other countries that have as stringent of a policy as the TCPA here in the United States?
I know
that's a hard question,
but let me separate the answer. Is a lot of regulators around the world, similar to the FCC but in other countries, are also dealing with spam, with robocalls, so they have their own form of dealing with them. What I would say is unique about the TCPA is the uncapped statutory damages. While in other countries, yes, you could get a fine or you could get a lawsuit for calling or for invading the privacy of certain receivers of the text messages, the exposure that you have is completely disproportionate to what the U.S. has. In the U.S., with the statutory damages are $500 to $1,500 per message.
Per text message,
Sends the final awards in any lawsuit to the billions of dollars even.
So no other countries have that high of a penalty for text message spam.
Now the exposure, if we compare the exposure under the TCPA in the U.S. with other companies, it's ridiculous how the TCPA is way high there.
It does protect consumers, though, and in text message marketing, we see 99% open rates. We see 90% of text messages opened within 3 minutes. And I think the reason is because we don't see a lot of text message spam. In foreign countries, I'm guessing there is more text message spam because there isn't as much of a punishment.
Yes, correct. We understand, and as a company, you want to comply with applicable rules. but also the fine or the lawsuit needs to be reasonable. You cannot expect for making one mistake for your whole company to go to bankruptcy.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a pretty hefty fine.
Yeah, I'm just giving one example. We have Canada, who has similar fines or exposure than the US, but for them to actually impose a fine, they go through the reasonableness of the sanction. So if it was just a one-off mistake and they see that the company was in compliance and was diligent in their business, they can reduce it. And they also have a cap of $10 million.
Oh, for the whole thing?
Yes.
Because here it's $500 to $1,500 per text message, per person, for everybody. So these things could be billion-dollar lawsuits, even for just one text, like a mistake.
Correct.
Okay.
Here in the TCPA Defense Force, we have made this analysis comparing several jurisdictions and several countries, and we have examples in Spain that there was this company that sent up to 6 million text messages in violation of their TCPA equivalent law.
Okay.
If you're talking about 6 million messages under the TCPA, your exposure is billions.
Somewhere up in there. Okay. Any other things that companies should be aware of when dealing with kind of international text messaging?
I would just make them aware that the FCC does care about this.
Okay.
The FCC and the enforcement unit has recognized that not most, but a big percentage of text messages coming from that are in violation of the TCPA come from abroad.
Okay.
So what they have done is they have several memorandums of understanding. They have several agreements with enforcers all over the world in trying to locate where are these spam initiating so they can attack it. Okay. So the FCC cares about it, is taking actions to do it. So never think that, yes, even if it applies, how are they going to even know that I'm doing it?
That's what I was thinking. If it's in a different country, it's kind of like, what are the chances?
Yeah, the FCC is in active collaboration with other agencies around the world to try to locate and prevent this kind of breaching messages.
That's good because it protects consumers in the United States from receiving text message spam, whether it's from the United States or from outside the United States or agents. I think that's a good thing from a consumer perspective.
And compliant companies like Tatango don't want to have competition by non-compliant companies coming from abroad.
That's a good point. Man, a lot learning today. Again, my name is Derek Johnson. We're here at Innovista Law with the TCPA Defense Force, and we're talking TCPA compliance. Thanks for watching our video today. If you like this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up on YouTube. If you want to see more of these types of videos, be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have comments or questions, please leave a comment or question in the comment section below.